calendar, we are 78 days away from the midterms. And for Democrats trying to take back control in Washington, and I'm pretty sure that is all of them, there's one primary objective in mind: protect this election. My dear friend and colleague Chris Jansing had the very rare opportunity to speak with Democratic Party leaders in Texas, South Carolina, Nevada, Michigan, and Kentucky. And here's what the party head in Texas had to say.
As the state party chairman in Texas, I get out of bed every day figuring out what I can do to build a voter protection team. I'm terrified, frankly, of what this administration is going to do.
Terrified.
I am terrified of what the Republican administration in Texas and in D.C. will do when the voters show up and vote them out. And so I'm working every day to build the largest voter protection team that we have ever had in Texas.
Joining the group chat, MS Now chief political reporter Chris Jansing. Okay, the largest voter protection team. What does that look like on the ground? What does it mean?
By far, 5 times more people working on this in Texas than they have ever had before. That includes 2 lawyers who are going to be overseeing everything. They are going to have offices in 8 different regions, 8 regional directors. This word terrified is something I heard over and over. We're really scared. We're really preparing. There's 3 ways that they're doing that. They say legislate, litigate, and communicate. Legislate means look at the law. The law says, you know this better than anybody, Donald Trump and the federal government do not run these elections. And so they are preparing to litigate. And they aren't just waiting to see what happens. They have been actually having war rooms, gaming out what are the most likely challenges that they're going to see. How do we prepare to take those on?
Do they have the power to do so? Donald Trump and the Republican Party have very successfully been changing out a number of seats in so many states. So the people that stood in the way of Donald Trump trying to mess with the last presidential election aren't even in those jobs anymore.
Well, let's start at the top, right? The DOJ. The DOJ is very different today than it was in 2020. They know that, which is why they feel they have to have these teams as big as they are. They do still feel like they have the law on their side, and they've won a lot of these cases that they've had in the past. And, you know, finally, they would like to prevent some of this stuff from happening, so they're out there communicating. Let's not be Pollyanna and say, oh, there's voter misinformation. There are lies out there, just outright lies, trying to keep people from going to the polls. There are threats of ICE to try to keep people from going to the polls. So they have also a huge communication network. The DNC is working with state parties. There are a lot of groups like Fair Fight in Georgia that are working to get things together. But I just want to say this, because I heard it so many times, not just from state party chairs, but people who are running for office, people who are in office. When I was at the DNC summer meeting, please, let's not normalize this, that the biggest threat to voter security, the biggest threat to free and fair elections is from the president of the United States and the federal government. They know that, and they're gaming it out right now.
You talked to Kentucky's Democratic Party chair specifically about how money plays a huge role in the end game here, and I want to share a little bit of that.
Investment in states, investments in red states like Kentucky that so many people have written off, is that we've been able to win special elections after special elections. We've been able to flip seats in places that people have written off, likely building to take back the Senate, take back the House. How we get there is not only these big races, but these small races, municipalities that have been in Republican strongholds for years.
And the one thing Republicans have right now going into these elections almost feels like an unlimited amount of money.
It is almost an unlimited amount of money, and they recognize that. They also recognize, in spite of having some candidates who are prolific fundraisers like Jon Ossoff, they cannot meet that dark money. That's not going to change. So
and many of their candidates don't want to, because they want dark money out of politics.
And that's part of why people are voting for them, because they have made the case very clearly about what the quid pro quo is when you have people putting millions into it. So there's a couple things they're doing. One is, and this started actually before the ruling that allowed unlimited money, that is, they have been re-emphasizing ground game. Fascinating conversation I had with a longtime Democratic Party operative who said, look, the difference in money, $20 million is definitely double the amount of $10 million.
Yes.
But $100 million is not double $50 million, because there is diminishing returns. There's diminishing returns because people are inundated with this stuff. There's diminishing returns that even in the last 2 to 4 years, all these alerts you get on your phone, you can now block them.
We're sick of them.
And it also can have a negative effect. So where's that money going? Where are they strategically putting their money in the ground game? And they're finding out something fascinating. I can remember as early as 2000 going door to door with people who were campaigning for George W. Bush. Hi, are you going to vote? Here's something for you to look at. And then they go to the next house. They're engaging people in conversations. They're asking people, what's on your mind? And then when they tell them, they are trained to tell them what that candidate is going to do to address their concerns about the economy in a lot of different places, what they're doing about these new big AI centers, right? What are they going to do about the specific things that are affecting their lives? Look, nobody doesn't want more money. Nobody doesn't appreciate money. They also are trying to live in the world that they are in, and they believe that organizing and ground game can be the great equalizer. We've already seen it in some of the midterms.
Yeah, listen, I mean, again, we're talking about the lived experience of Americans, right? So if you're going door to door and you're not just spending money on commercials and throwing out slogans, you're finding out that grocery prices are still high, that oil prices and energy prices, gasoline prices are too high. You're finding out that insurance costs, despite what we've seen in some recent inflation reports, are still going up, not coming down. And so as long as you're talking to people and engaging them about their lived experience as opposed to all these other amorphous concepts that are being kicked around, you're going to get more traction and you're going to maybe have a bigger impact.
Affordability and accountability. And by accountability, I mean holding the Trump administration, holding this moment of mass corruption accountable. We saw Jon Ossoff, who you just mentioned, who is a money-raising machine, speak at a re-election rally yesterday. And he went directly after Donald Trump, even mentioning the new Air Force One. And I just want to share some highlights of it.
And while the sailors on the Lincoln fight his war, while he fruitlessly drains our munitions and oil reserves, the president sleeps through his meetings. He golfs and trades stocks. See, he doesn't want to do the job. He wants to build his ballroom and travel with Natalie on their apparently defenseless flying palace gifted by the Emir of Qatar.
Okay, he was referring to Natalie Harp, an executive assistant to the president. And I want us, at least, to be abundantly clear. We do not have evidence of any relationship between them. However, this kind of trolling from Democrats, from the likes of Jon Ossoff, seems like it is becoming more and more frequent and effective. What do you make of it?
Yeah, you don't have evidence, but I do run a fake newspaper, and I can tell you. People do refer to her as the human printer, and that's not me. She prints out all this stupid stuff that Donald Trump reads on Truth Social all day, and he loves her for it, and that's just the way that is. So, look, it's good stuff. I'm glad that somebody is playing in this space. Also, Jon Ossoff's lighting guy, give me a ring. You look great.
He sure does. He sure does.
Yeah, it's really good. But like that's the kind of thing where in the next, I've seen it myself. You know, I've been in Michigan and Wisconsin for these last couple of primaries, just hanging out, and people just want somebody who will say like, no, we got to get rid of ICE. Just not like they don't want equivocation. They don't want any of this stuff. They want people who talk like that, very plain language. And if people are in like an escalatory mode going into these primaries where they're trying to one up each other on what kind of justice they can get against the president, we're going to be in a good spot.
I thought that was the most successful broadside I've seen. Like, you take all Gavin Newsom stuff that he was putting on X and like kind of the very sarcastic stuff that he was throwing at the president. Ossoff hit the president right where he lives.
He's also a lot less vulnerable than Gavin Newsom is.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, there's much of what you could go after Donald Trump and Republicans just turn to Gavin Newsom and say, I'm rubber, you're glue. Yeah. That's not the case with Jon Ossoff.
No, not at all. But he was very clear. There was nothing cute about it. There was nothing, playful. It was a straight on, broadside, direct hit.
Yeah. Ossoff also offers substance.
Yeah.
I mean, he has sort of the charisma of a John Kennedy, but with a different accent. And so he says enough is enough. And Steph, that's what you're saying, right? Affordability and accountability. He encapsulates everything that's wrong with Donald Trump in that one phrase. The Democrats would be very smart to pick that up. But then he goes on and he makes the positive points about what he would do.
Democrats also voted on a new presidential primary calendar for 2028, making South Carolina the first state to vote on candidates instead of Iowa. Nevada, New Mexico also moved up in the calendar. What do you make of that? That, to me, is a very clear diversity play.
Yeah, and you want to see happiness? Talk to the Democratic chair of South Carolina. I mean, but look, these folks have been ignored, and I think part of what this is accomplishing is taking where they know the votes are, in Nevada, for example, where they know people have not gotten the kind of attention that, nothing against Iowa, but that Iowa has gotten. And so that's also energizing in their own communities, right? It's also energizing their possibilities for putting more people in office, which, again, has a huge impact. But I think I really, maybe with a few rare exceptions, it was unanimous. They understood that something needed to be done, that there needed to be a change to really speak to what the voter base looks like now. 40% Hispanic in Nevada. I think that's right. But in any case, look, they see an opening. Trump and the economy have made a huge opening. This is a way they feel like they're going to walk through it. They're going to walk through it with this. They're going to walk through it with the diversity of candidates they have. They are not taught. I'm sure you heard Terry McAuliffe this weekend. Don't blow this. Don't take what is being handed to you on a silver platter. Terry didn't say that. Those are my words, to paraphrase him. And get over this infighting. As one state party chair said to me, the candidate who works in New York City is different than the one that works in Elko, Nevada. And we have to recognize that and figure out that the big issues that our voters are telling us you have to address, we all agree on.
Affordability,